They called him Private Daniel Reeve. No titles, no medals, no legend, just a name stitched onto his chest plate. He was 26, born in the Martian colonies, bred in the gravity wells of humanity's hard worlds. He wasn't special by any measure of alien standards, short, compact, with eyes that looked too tired and a face that looked too human. Fragile, slow, limited. To the alien species of the Coalition, humans were still the newcomers, barely a generation into interstellar service, tolerated because they could take orders and fill the ranks. The veterans of the other species, the tall, scale-armored Varn, the psychic Elori, the four-armed Dreth, mocked the human recruits. Soft meat, they called them. Bone brittle in low gravity. Reeve had heard it all before. He didn't care. The others cared, though. He saw it in the clenched jaws of his squadmates, in the quiet fury behind their eyes. They were stationed on Arkland 4, a jungle world half covered in boiling swamps and acid mist. The mission was supposed to be simple: forward recon of Zhaik movement, another insurgent faction trying to reclaim territory. The briefing had sounded routine, but the Zhaik weren't supposed to have artillery. They weren't supposed to have plasma burrowers either. And yet, less than 12 hours after touchdown, the platoon's comms went silent under the thunder of enemy fire. Reeve's squad of 9 was reduced to 6 in the first barrage. Sergeant Kellen, half Varn, built like a walking tank, was torn apart when a plasma bolt caught his side. It was over in a second. The shockwave hit hard enough to knock Reeve on his back, ears ringing. When he got up, Kellen was gone. No time to grieve. Just move. They fell back through the jungle, sensors shorted by the electromagnetic bursts. The air was thick, heavy, filled with the stink of burning resin and metal. Reeve's visor kept fogging, forcing him to wipe it clean with the back of his glove every few seconds. Lieutenant Vara, an Elori with silver skin and violet eyes, was trying to coordinate the retreat over the scrambled comms. "Squad Beta, regroup at point Theta 7, she said, her voice sharp. "Controlled, static." Then silence. Reeve tapped his comm. "No signal, ma'am." Vara looked at him, eyes narrowing. "Then we find them the old way. Move." They trudged through mud up to their knees, plasma bolts lighting up the canopy above. Every time the jungle flashed, Reeve saw shapes moving. Zhaik, fast and low, their reflective carapaces blending into the foliage. He fired short bursts into the darkness, not expecting to hit anything. He just needed them to stay back. Private Anya, another human, muttered behind him. "They're hurting us." Reeve didn't answer. She was right, though. The Zhaik were pushing them downhill toward the marsh. He checked his ammo. 2 mags left. Not enough. It was never enough. By the time they reached the marsh's edge, 3 more were down. The last Dreth in their unit, Roka, had taken a hit through the shoulder but kept moving, 4 hands dragging his heavy rifle like a lifeline. Vara's glow suit was torn, leaking pale light. Only Reeve and Anya were still uninjured, if exhaustion didn't count. They found brief cover behind a crashed recon skiff, half sunk in the mire. Vara crouched low, scanning the horizon with her broken visor. "We're cut off," she said, voice steady despite everything. "The Zhaik have the ridge." "No extraction possible," Roka grunted, blood leaking between his mandibles. "Then we fight." "Fight with what?" Anya snapped. "We've got half a clip between us and a radio that's fried." Reeve didn't speak. He just reached into his pouch and pulled out a flare gun. Not a weapon, but bright enough to blind and draw fire. He handed it to Anya. "Make them look," he said. "What?" "Make them look away from me." Vara's eyes met his, calm and unreadable. "What are you doing, Private?" Reeve checked the mag on his rifle. 1 full, 1 partial. Finishing the job. Before anyone could stop him, he vaulted over the wreckage and vanished into the swamp. The world went quiet except for his breathing and the buzz of insects. He moved through the reeds like a shadow, low and deliberate. Every step burned, every breath stung, but he kept going. He'd grown up in worse. On Mars, they trained them in low-oxygen tunnels and pressure drills until their lungs adapted. He remembered his father's words. "You don't beat death. You outlast it. The Zhaik were closing in." He could hear them, a chorus of wet clicks and metallic scrapes. They moved fast, confident. They'd seen humans before, seen them break easy. Reeve crouched by a fallen log, pulled the pin on a smoke grenade, and lobbed it toward the nearest sound. The jungle filled with white fog. He switched his visor to thermal and saw three shapes emerging. Humanoid, armored in shell-like plating. He waited until the first one stepped close enough that he could see the glint of its weapon. Then he fired. The first burst took it in the throat. The second dropped the one behind it. The third kept coming. Reeve ducked low, rolling under a clawed arm, stabbing upward with his combat knife. The blade punched through soft tissue. The Jike screamed high and shrill. He shoved it off, panting, covered in its black blood. He didn't stop. Couldn't. More were coming. He fell back deeper into the swamp, firing bursts to slow them down. His HUD was flashing red, armor breach, suit pressure dropping, but his hands stayed steady. He reached the ridge and ducked behind a tree, reloading. One mag left. The Jike leader stepped into view. A tall one, with ceremonial spines and plasma gauntlets that glowed blue in the mist. It spoke in a clicking dialect. Voice translated through the comm static. "Human, surrender. You will not survive." Reeve spat, blood mixing with sweat. "That's what they all say." He fired full auto straight into the leader's chest. The creature staggered but didn't fall. It lunged, claws out, slashing through his armor. Pain lanced through his ribs. Reeve screamed, dropped his rifle, and tackled it. They hit the ground hard, rolling through mud and ash. He grabbed the creature's gauntlet, forcing it away from his throat, but its strength was overwhelming. He reached for anything, rock, debris, his knife, and drove it into the creature's neck again and again until it stopped moving. He lay there for a second, chest heaving, the world spinning around him. His visor was cracked, leaking humidity. His heart hammered in his ears. Overhead, a flare burst through the mist, bright red. Anya. That meant she'd drawn them off. The plan worked. Reeve dragged himself to his feet, body shaking. He pressed the comm. "Vara, move. They're focused on me." "Go," Static answered him. Then her voice, faint but alive. "Private Reeve, do you read?" "I'm here," he said. There was a pause. "You won't make it back." He laughed weakly. Wouldn't be the first time someone said that. Then the ridge lit up, artillery fire raining from somewhere beyond the swamp. He didn't have time to run. He threw himself into a pit, covering his head as explosions tore the jungle apart. The shockwave threw him half buried under mud and wreckage. When he came to, everything was quiet. The Jike were gone. What was left of them scattered and burning. Reeve's armor was ruined, chest plate caved in. His comms were dead. He tried to move but couldn't feel his left leg. He laughed once, then coughed blood. He stared up at the pale green sky through the broken canopy. "Guess that's it," he whispered. "Hell of a run." Then, through the haze, he saw figures approaching. Vara and Anya, dragging what was left of Roka. They'd made it. He smiled faintly, eyes closing. Vara knelt beside him, her hands glowing faintly as she checked his vitals. "He's alive," she said softly, almost to herself. Anya looked down at him, eyes wide. "You crazy bastard. You actually pulled it off." Reeve's lips moved. "Told you not to bet against a Deathworlder." The aliens didn't know the word yet. They didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But after that day, they would start to learn. Because Reeve didn't die that night. He refused to. And for the first time, the galaxy would understand that on Earth, even ordinary men are born from worlds that tried to kill them. And failed. ChatGPT said, "The next morning came gray and hollow. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of blood and burned ozone." Cole awoke to the distant hum of atmospheric drones, his armor HUD flickering with low-power warnings. He pushed himself upright from the trench wall where he'd fallen asleep sitting up, pulse rifle resting across his knees. His platoon, or what was left of it, was huddled along the collapsed berm. Thorn, his second in command, was already awake, chewing on a ration stick with a face like carved granite. "Command says hold this line another 24, Thorn muttered. "Relief's coming from orbit." Cole snorted softly, rubbing at his bruised ribs. "That's what they said yesterday." And the day before that? Thorn grunted, not arguing. They both knew the score. Relief wasn't coming. The orbitals were gone, or cut off, or had written them off. They were the relief now for whoever came next. The alien front was quiet. For now. Across the shattered plain, the Ashtari lines shimmered faintly in the heat. Even from here, Cole could see the silver-blue armor glinting, their elegant formations standing motionless in perfect symmetry. The Ashtari were beautiful, in the way venomous things often were. Long limbs, glassy armor, and soft voices like wind through reeds. They'd mocked humanity's crude weapons and heavy armor when this war began. They called Earth soldiers brutes wrapped in steel. That was before the Ashtari realized that brutes, when cornered, didn't break. They bit. Cole spent the morning overseeing repairs. The exosuits were running on jury-rigged power cells. The medbay was a tarp over a hole in the dirt. Doc Alvarez was out of painkillers and running low on antiseptics, but her hands never stopped. Cole helped drag a wounded man back to the line. A young recruit from Luna named Harrow, pale and shaking, blood soaking through his thigh seal. Cole clapped him on the shoulder after Alvarez finished patching him up. "You'll live," he said, forcing a grin. Harrow looked up at him, eyes wide with exhaustion. "Sarge, why aren't they finishing us off? They've got artillery, drones. They could just wipe us out." Cole looked past him toward the shimmering Ashtari lines. "Because they're still trying to understand us," he said quietly, "and they're afraid to get close." By noon, the sky darkened with movement. Figures gliding just below the clouds. Ashatari aerial scouts, their bodies slender, wings of translucent energy spread wide. The men watched them with tense faces, fingers near triggers. But no strike came. Not yet. Instead, a voice came through the open channels, smooth, feminine, and cold. "Human command. You are surrounded. Your resistance has been noted. Lay down your arms, and your wounded will be spared." The words were translated in a dozen tongues, echoing from the ruined city walls. Cole listened, then slowly raised his mic. "This is Sergeant Cole, 3rd Marine Expeditionary Earth Corps. Appreciate the offer. But we don't do surrender." Silence followed. Then the alien voice again, curious. "You cannot win." Cole looked around at his blood-soaked, dirt-caked soldiers. "Winning's not the point," he said. "Surviving is." The next assault came an hour later. The Ashtari advanced in waves. Beautiful, terrifying waves of light and motion. Energy lances cut across the trenches, burning through sandbags and steel alike. Cole dove into cover, barking orders. "Suppressing fire! 2 o'clock! Move that gun up!" The human line erupted in sound. Roaring rifles, machine cannons, grenade launchers pounding rhythm into the chaos. The ground shook under them, dust and ash flying into the air. Cole fired until his rifle overheated, then grabbed a fallen trooper's weapon without missing a beat. The air stank of ozone and blood. Alien voices rose and fell, almost like music, until screams replaced them. A figure vaulted the trench wall, an Ashtari captain in ornate armor, blade glowing blue-white. He moved with impossible grace, slicing through a defender before Cole could turn. The human sergeant charged forward, smashing into him shoulder first, knocking the alien off balance. They crashed into the dirt, wrestling for control. The blade sliced through Cole's shoulder plate, searing his flesh. He bit down a yell, punched the alien square in the jaw. The Ashatari hissed in shock. The idea of being struck with a fist seemed foreign to him. Cole grabbed a combat knife and drove it into the alien's throat. Hot blood hissed across his gauntlet. The alien convulsed, then went still. Cole ripped the blade free, chest heaving. He looked up to see his soldiers staring at him wide-eyed. "They bleed," he growled, tossing the knife aside. "Same as us." When the attack finally broke, the field was a nightmare of corpses. Alien bodies shimmered faintly, already dissolving in the sunlight. Human dead lay still in their armor, faces half buried in dust. Cole walked the line, checking the wounded, patching what he could. Alvarez was kneeling beside a dying man, whispering a prayer. Thorne stood nearby, staring at the horizon. "They'll come again," he said quietly. Cole nodded. "Let them." His voice was flat. "We'll still be here." That night the Ashtari called again. Not over comms. This time, a single envoy approached under a white flag of biolight. She walked slowly, unarmed, her tall frame wrapped in flowing armor. Cole met her halfway between the lines, rifle slung but ready. Her face was almost human, save for the faint glow beneath her skin and the way her pupils shifted like liquid. "Sergeant Cole," she said in that wind-soft voice, "your people fight beyond reason." "Why?" Cole stared at her. "Because no one else will." She tilted her head, studying him. "You are dying. This world will kill you." Cole shrugged. "We were born on a world that kills us every day. We just got used to it." The envoy's expression flickered. Confusion, maybe awe. "You call yourselves Deathworlders," she said slowly. "But you're fragile. Your bones break. Your lungs fail. You burn easily. What makes you think you can survive us?" Cole smiled faintly. "Because we already have." He turned and walked away. When he returned to the trenches, Thorne was waiting, holding a cracked datapad. "Got something," he said. "Command uplinks faint but readable." The static hissed, and then a voice crackled through. "3rd Marines, this is Orbital Command. Reinforcement en route. Hold position for extraction." Cole stared at the sky. Stars burned faintly above the haze. "Copy that," he said quietly. "We'll hold. The reinforcements never came." At dawn, the Ashtari unleashed something new. Artillery from orbit. The first strike hit a kilometer west, a blast of pure energy that vaporized half the ridge. The second landed closer, knocking Cole off his feet, heat washing over him like a furnace. He stumbled up, ears ringing, dust choking his lungs. The trench was gone, just rubble and smoke. Thorne was shouting, dragging survivors out from under debris. Alvarez was gone. Cole didn't let himself look for her body. He grabbed the nearest rifle and screamed orders through the chaos. They fell back through the ruins, every building a tomb. The Ashtari descended like a storm, cutting off retreat paths, flooding the streets with fire. And still the humans fought. Bleeding, coughing, half-blind. They fought. Harrow took a hit to the chest, armor shattering. Cole pulled him behind a wall, pressed a hand to the wound. "Stay with me, kid," he shouted. Harrow's lips moved, barely audible. "You said we survive, right?" Cole's throat tightened. "Damn right we do." By nightfall, the city was a crater. Only 30 humans remained, huddled in the bones of a burned cathedral. Cole leaned against a wall, rifle across his knees, listening to the wind howl through broken glass. The sky above flickered with distant fire. Ashtari ships burning in low orbit. He smiled faintly. Somewhere up there, humanity was still hitting back. "They think we're done," Thorne said beside him. "They always do," Cole murmured. He looked at his bloodied hands. "That's their mistake." Outside, the alien soldiers regrouped, their commanders confused and wary. They had expected surrender. Instead, they found ghosts that refused to die. They whispered among themselves about the humans, their madness, their endurance, their refusal to yield. The word Deathworlder began to take on a different tone in their ranks. It no longer meant savage or primitive. It meant unstoppable. As the first light of dawn crawled over the battlefield, Cole stood, shoulders straight despite the pain. He looked out at the ruined horizon, smoke curling like ghosts around the wreckage. His voice was low, almost a growl. "They wanted to see what a Deathworlder was," he said. "Guess they're about to learn." The morning sun bled through a haze of ash, turning the sky a sickly bronze. The ruins of the city stretched in every direction, jagged skeletons of steel and concrete silhouetted against the glow of distant fires. Cole stood among them, helmet clipped to his belt, his face streaked with soot and blood. He hadn't slept. None of them had. Around him, the remnants of 3rd Marines moved like ghosts, tending to the wounded, salvaging what little ammunition remained. The air stank of decay and ozone. Every breath burned. Somewhere beyond the smoldering skyline, the Ashtari were regrouping. He could hear their distant hum, the rhythmic pulse of alien engines, methodical and cruel. They would come again. They always came again. Cole tightened the straps on his rifle, the motion automatic now, like a prayer. His right shoulder throbbed where the plasma blade had cut him 2 days before. the wound sealed with field foam that smelled faintly of iron. He caught his reflection in a shard of glass, eyes sunken, jaw dark with stubble, a faint tremor in his hands. He looked like hell. He looked alive. Behind him, Thorn shuffled over with a scavenged ration pack. "Breakfast of champions," he muttered, tossing it over. Cole caught it, tore it open, and grimaced at the cold, chalky protein bar. "If this is what winning tastes like, I'll stick to dying." Thorn gave a dry laugh, then leaned against a cracked pillar, eyes scanning the horizon. "You hear what they're saying out there?" Cole glanced up. "Who?" "The aliens. The Ashtari net's leaking chatter. They're calling us revenants now. Ghosts that don't stay dead." Cole chewed slowly, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Revenants. Has a nice ring to it." For a while the two men said nothing. The silence of the dead city was oppressive, broken only by the distant crackle of fire and the whisper of wind through ruined glass. Then came the static hiss in Cole's earpiece, a faint signal too weak to be command. He tapped his helmet, amplifying. A voice came through, ragged with interference. "This is Outpost Delta. Any human forces reading? Repeat, any survivors?" Cole froze. Thorn's eyes snapped up. Cole turned up the gain. "Delta, this is Sergeant Cole, 3rd Marine Expeditionary. We're alive." "Barely." "Location, Grid 719, south of the Capitol ruins. What's your status?" The reply crackled through bursts of static. "Holding position. Ashtari armor advancing. Need reinforcement. Anyone who can move." Then the line went dead. Cole exhaled slowly, jaw tightening. "That's 2 clicks east," Thorn said. "We can't move all these wounded." Cole's gaze hardened. "Then we leave them with Alvarez's team. We take whoever can still fight." They gathered what was left of their ammunition. Half-empty magazines, a handful of grenades, 1 working rocket tube. The survivors lined up silently, faces drawn and pale under grime. 24 of them now. Cole looked them over, his voice low and steady. "Outpost Delta's under siege. They're asking for help. No command, no evac. It's just us." No one spoke. "They didn't need to." Cole gave a single nod. "Then let's remind them why Deathworlders don't stay down." They moved through the ruins at dawn, shadows among shadows. The streets were graveyards of twisted vehicles and melted stone. The ground crunched underfoot, every step echoing faintly. Cole led the way, eyes scanning for motion, rifle raised. They passed what had once been a playground, a rusted swing set half buried in debris, a child's toy scorched black. Harrow walked beside him, limping, his armor patched with duct tape and prayer. "Sarge," he said quietly, "you ever wonder why we keep doing this?" Cole didn't answer right away. "Because if we don't," he said finally, "no one else will." They reached Delta by mid-morning. The outpost was barely that. A gutted communications tower surrounded by sandbag walls and bodies. Smoke curled lazily from the wreckage. Cole motioned for silence, moving low along the perimeter. The sound of movement came from within, soft, deliberate. He signaled Thorn forward. 2 shapes emerged from the rubble. Ashtari scouts, tall and silver, their armor shimmering in the light. Cole waited until one turned its back. Then he fired. The round punched through the alien's chest, sending it sprawling. The other turned, weapon rising, but Thorn's burst took it down before it could scream. Silence fell again. Cole stepped into the open, scanning. Inside, the surviving humans lay huddled near a shattered console. 4 soldiers, eyes wide with disbelief as Cole's team entered. "Jesus," one of them breathed. "We thought we were the last." Cole gave a grim smile. "Not yet." They dug in quickly. The outpost was defensible enough. A choke point with limited approaches. Cole positioned his men along the collapsed walls, setting up what few heavy weapons remained. The air buzzed faintly, the hum of approaching engines growing louder. Thorn crouched beside him, peering through binoculars. "They're coming," he said. "About a company, maybe more." Cole grunted. "Good. Saves us the trouble of finding them." The first Ashtari units appeared minutes later, sleek armor glinting, moving with inhuman precision. Their weapons lit the ruins with flickering blue arcs. Cole's team opened up in response, bullets and plasma streaking across the open ground. The noise was deafening. Dust filled the air. Harrow fired until his rifle clicked dry, then switched to his sidearm, cursing through his teeth. The aliens pressed forward, elegant and merciless, their formation shifting like liquid. Cole threw a grenade, the blast shattering their rhythm. "Push them back," he shouted, voice raw. "Don't give them the ground!" One by one, his soldiers fell. A rocket hit the wall, sending shards of metal into the air. Cole was thrown to the ground, ears ringing. When he looked up, he saw Thorn dragging a wounded trooper behind cover, his armor scorched black. The kid was dead before they made it. Cole's stomach turned, but there was no time to grieve. He rose, firing into the advancing line until his weapon overheated. An Ashitari blade sliced past him, missing by inches. He drove his knife up through the alien's jaw, blood splattering his faceplate. Another came at him. He shot it point blank, then ripped its weapon free. The alien rifle hissed in his hands, but he used it anyway, its recoil strange and powerful. Hours blurred into madness. The ground was littered with corpses, smoke, and the echo of screams. When the firing finally stopped, Cole's world was silent again. The Ashtari were gone. What was left of them? Only 7 humans still breathed, coughing, bleeding, barely standing. Cole looked around. The outpost nothing but rubble now. Harrow sat against a wall, one arm missing, staring at nothing. "Did we win?" he asked softly. Cole knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're still breathing," he said. "That's close enough." By nightfall, the temperature dropped. The survivors built a fire from broken beams, the orange glow flickering against shattered walls. Thorn sat beside Cole, rubbing his eyes. "They're not going to stop, you know," he said. "They'll keep coming until we're dust." Cole nodded slowly. "Then we keep fighting until we're ghosts." Thorn gave a dry laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You ever think maybe we really are the monsters they think we are?" Cole stared into the flames. "No," he said. "Monsters enjoy this. We just don't have a choice." That night, the sky above them burned again, Ashtari ships falling in streaks of fire. Somewhere in orbit, humanity was still fighting. Cole watched, his jaw tight. The radio hissed faintly again. A new voice, calm and distant. "This is Fleet Command. To all ground units, orbital control regained. Extraction inbound. Hold your beacon positions." Thorn blinked. "They actually came?" Cole exhaled a laugh that sounded more like disbelief. "Hell must have frozen over." At dawn, the dropships came, black angular beasts cutting through the haze. The Marines stumbled out into the open, waving flares. Dust whipped around them as the ships touched down. Medics poured out, voices shouting through the chaos. Cole helped lift Harrow aboard, then turned to look at the battlefield one last time. The horizon was littered with alien bodies, the ground scorched and broken. The Ashtari had retreated. He could almost feel their eyes watching from afar, calculating, questioning. He wondered what they saw when they looked at him now. As the ramp closed, the medic pressed a hand to his chest wound. "You're lucky, Sergeant," she said. "You should be dead." Cole gave her a tired grin. "That's the thing about us Deathworlders," he murmured. "We don't do should." When the ship lifted off, the city fell away beneath them, shrinking into a smear of smoke and ruin. Cole sat against the bulkhead, eyes closed, the vibration of engines humming through his bones. Around him, the survivors sat in silence. They'd lost everything, but they were alive, and somewhere out there, the Ashitari would be telling stories about the humans who refused to die. Cole opened his eyes, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. He knew the war wasn't over, not even close. But something had changed. Humanity had earned a name out here, one that would never fade. Deathworlders. He smiled faintly, the word rolling through his mind like a promise. If the galaxy wanted to learn what that meant, he thought, then they'd keep teaching it. One broken world at a time. The transport shuddered violently as it broke through the upper atmosphere, turbulence rattling the hull like distant thunder. Cole's fingers gripped the edge of the bulkhead, his knuckles white under the grime. Around him, the surviving Marines sat strapped in, eyes hollow, armor cracked, every motion sluggish with exhaustion. The medic moved between them, checking vitals, patching leaks in the suit seals. muttering quiet words none of them were really hearing. The hum of the engines was steady but low, too low. He could feel the ship straining. "We losing altitude?" Thorne called out from across the compartment. The pilot's voice came back over the intercom, tight and clipped. "Minor stabilizer damage. We'll make it to the carrier, if nothing else goes wrong." Cole glanced up, eyes narrowing. "And if something does?" The intercom crackled, then silence. Minutes stretched into hours. The dropship broke through the storm front, revealing the black void beyond. The stars were faint behind a haze of orbital dust. Out there, the remnants of Earth's fleet drifted like broken bones. Scarred destroyers, half-functional carriers, tattered fighter wings clinging to formation. Cole felt a surge of something between pride and grief. Humanity wasn't supposed to survive space warfare, not against species born among the stars. But they had. Barely. "That your homecoming parade?" Thorne muttered, nodding toward the shattered fleet. Cole's lips twitched into a tired smile. "Hell of a welcome." They docked with the carrier Resolute an hour later. The hangar was chaos. Mechanics shouting, medics rushing, smoke curling from the wounded ships that limped in one after another. Cole stepped onto the deck, boots clanging on the metal floor. The smell hit him first. Oil, sweat, blood, disinfectant. It was the scent of survival. A young officer approached, tablet in hand, trying to look composed. "Sergeant Cole, 3rd Marines?" Cole nodded. "Report to debrief Sector 7. Fleet Command wants a word." The officer's voice faltered slightly at the sight of his battered armor and the dried blood on his neck. They heard what happened on Tethra." Cole didn't respond. He just followed the line of exhausted soldiers down the corridor, Thorne limping beside him. Debrief was a small metal room with one flickering light. Across the table sat a commander with a face like steel and eyes that had seen too many funerals. "Sergeant," she said, without looking up from the report, "you lost 87% of your unit. You held a city against superior forces for 72 hours. Explain how." Cole sat down slowly, resting his helmet on the table. "We didn't have a choice," he said. "They came. We fought. We just didn't stop." The commander looked up, studying him. "The Ashtari reports call your defense irrational persistence. They can't understand why you didn't retreat, why your wounded kept firing, why you burned their wounded instead of leaving them." Her voice carried no accusation, only curiosity. "What should I tell them, Sergeant? What drives a human soldier to keep fighting when logic says it's over?" Cole met her gaze evenly. "Because death's never been enough to stop us." She regarded him in silence for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fleet Command will want you to speak at the next council session. They're curious about you." Cole frowned. "Curious?" "The Ashtari have requested a ceasefire," she said. "They've asked to meet with representatives of your unit." The words hung in the air like smoke. "They want to understand what a Deathworlder really is." The council chamber aboard the Resolute was built for diplomacy, not war. Polished floors, bright lights, flags of a dozen allied worlds lining the walls. Cole stood at the far end, uniform cleaned but still scarred, boots polished but stained with the ghosts of Tethra's dirt. Across the table sat 3 Ashtari delegates, tall, elegant, their skin faintly luminescent under the lights. They regarded him as one might study a dangerous animal. The lead envoy, her eyes like molten silver, inclined her head. "Sergeant Cole," she said softly, her voice carrying that same musical lilt he remembered from the battlefield. "You are remarkable. Your kind defies every pattern we know of biology and behavior." Cole folded his arms. "We get that a lot." The envoy smiled faintly. "Our scans of your planet show it to be hostile. Toxic air, unstable climate, predatory life. By our standards, it should be uninhabitable. Yet you thrive there. You breed in violence and scarcity, and you call it home." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, does your kind not fear death?" Cole met her gaze without flinching. "Every day," he said. "That's why we're so damn good at living." The chamber was silent. The Ashtari exchanged glances, murmuring in their strange tongue. Finally, the envoy spoke again. "We believed your kind primitive. Now we believe you dangerous." Cole shrugged. Both can be true. She nodded slowly, almost respectfully. Perhaps, but I think you misunderstand, Sergeant. You've shown us what you are capable of. We now understand that to defeat a Deathworlder is not to destroy them, but to outlast them. And that? Her eyes softened. Wene, may not be possible. After the meeting, Cole stepped out onto the observation deck. The stars spread wide before him, cold, endless, and beautiful. Thorn found him there, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You look like you just stared down God himself," he said, offering one. Cole took it, sipping. It was bitter and hot and perfect. "They want peace," Cole said quietly. Thorn raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "For now. They're scared." He took another sip. But fear doesn't last. It curdles. Over the following weeks, the ceasefire held. Barely. Human ships began ferrying survivors home, and reconstruction teams dropped to the ruined colonies. Cole stayed with what was left of 3rd Marines, rebuilding the unit from scraps. New recruits arrived daily. Fresh faces, wide-eyed, not yet burned out by war. He trained them hard. No speeches, no glory. Just survival. Every night he dreamed of Tethra. The screams, the fire, the faces of the men who didn't make it out. The dreams never left him. Then came the report. A month into the ceasefire, a human convoy was ambushed near the border world of Asfor. Ashtari weapons, Ashtari tactics. No survivors. Fleet Command wanted answers, but the Ashtari denied involvement. Cole knew better. The peace was already rotting. He could smell it. He met with his commander in her quarters, standing at attention. "We can't ignore this," he said. "We hit them back now, or they'll think we're weak." The commander sighed, rubbing her temples. "If we break the ceasefire, the entire alliance collapses." "Then it collapses," Cole said flatly. "It's already broken." Within 48 hours, Cole's unit was redeployed. Officially, it was reconnaissance. Unofficially, it was payback. The new soldiers looked to him like he was a ghost wearing a uniform. He gave them orders in that same even tone, efficient, precise, emotionless. Inside, though, something darker had taken root. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about teaching the galaxy what it meant to provoke humanity twice. Their drop zone was a wasteland of ice and black sand. The Ashtari base shimmered in the distance like a mirage, its towers gleaming with faint energy. Cole led his team through the frost, moving silent as shadows. The air bit at their skin through the suits, every breath fogging their visors. Harrow's replacement, Private Mills, barely 20, kept glancing at Cole like a man watching a myth come to life. "Sarge," he whispered over comms, "why do they call us Deathworlders? I mean, I know it's supposed to sound badass, but—" Cole didn't answer at first. He just crouched behind a ridge, eyes fixed on the base. "Because we come from a planet that tried to kill us every day of our lives," he said quietly. "And we learned to love the fight." When the assault began, it was fast and merciless. No warnings, no speeches. Cole led from the front, cutting through alien ranks like a storm. The Ashtari had adapted, new shields, better armor, but it didn't matter. The humans fought like they had nothing left to lose. The base fell in under an hour. Cole stood amid the wreckage, his armor soaked in alien blood, the air thick with smoke. Thorn limped up beside him, panting. "We'll catch hell for this," he said. Cole nodded. "Probably, but we sent a message." As the fleet recalled them, Cole looked back one last time. The Ashtari dead lay scattered across the ice, their once perfect forms broken, their silver eyes staring blankly at the sky. He wondered if they finally understood. On the flight back, Thorn sat beside him in silence. After a long while, he said, "You ever think about going home?" Cole turned to look at him. "Earth? Yeah, real air, rain that doesn't burn, maybe a place that doesn't smell like death." Cole leaned his head back against the seat, eyes closing. "Home's gone for me," he said softly. "War took it. Left me with this." He tapped his chest plate. "This armor, these scars, that's all that's left." Thorn didn't reply. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Cole opened his eyes again, staring out the viewport as the stars slid past. Somewhere out there, another world was already dying. Another army was learning the same lesson. Humanity didn't break. They adapted. They endured. And when the galaxy mocked their fragile bodies, they laughed and kept walking through hell. He sipped what was left of his coffee, cold now, bitter as the void, and smiled faintly to himself. "Let them keep learning," he muttered. "Lesson's not over yet." By the time the last ship fell silent, the war had burned itself into the bones of the galaxy. Kyle stood in the wreckage of a world that had once been alive, lush and green, now buried under layers of ash and melted glass. The air stank of ozone and burnt metal, and the sky shimmered with radiation storms, silent witnesses to what humanity and the Vire had done to each other. His armor was a mosaic of patches and dents, his left arm bound in makeshift tape, his face marked by the thin white scars of exposure. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't even feel human anymore. He just was a survivor, like a cockroach at the end of creation. The ceasefire had come suddenly, like a dying gasp. After the Battle of Theros 9, the Vir had stopped sending ships. Their last transmission wasn't a threat, but a surrender. They called humans the death kind. The word spread across the remaining networks, through whispers in refugee camps and encrypted military channels. The Deathworlders, the ones who had lived where no others could, the ones who didn't die when they should. Kale had heard the word muttered by captured alien soldiers, not as an insult but a prayer. And in the silence that followed the war, it felt less like a title and more like a curse. When the human fleet limped home what was left of it, they didn't arrive as heroes. The colonies on Luna and Titan held ceremonies for the fallen, but no one cheered the survivors. Too many ghosts walked beside them. Kale's unit had been reduced from 200 to 6. The rest were vaporized, shredded, or left floating in vacuum. The ones who lived had the 1,000-yard stare that came from seeing too much, from killing too much. Earth had changed too. Cities were cleaner, quieter, but empty in ways that couldn't be fixed. Humanity had gone to war with a species that could level mountains, and they'd won, but at the cost of whatever innocence remained. Kyle had tried to disappear after that. He took a transfer to a survey mission, a reclamation team they called it, rebuilding war-torn colonies and resettling survivors. It sounded peaceful enough, but the universe had a way of finding its monsters again. On their third assignment, a Vire distress signal was picked up from a dead zone, a planet neither faction claimed anymore. The command wanted to investigate. Reconciliation, they said. Maybe even diplomacy. Kale volunteered, though he wasn't sure why. Maybe to see what was left of the enemy. Maybe to see if they were rebuilding too. The descent was rough. The planet's surface was cracked, scorched, and still bleeding radiation from orbital bombardments. The landing craft hissed as it cut through the toxic clouds. When they touched down, they found the ruins of a Vire city. Twisted towers, half-melted statues, and bones fused to metal. The team spread out in silence, Geiger counters ticking like nervous hearts. And then they found movement. Not soldiers, civilians. Half-starved Vire, their skin pale and translucent, their eyes huge in the dim light. They stared at the humans with a mixture of terror and awe. When Kale approached, one of them dropped to its knees. It whispered something in its language, and one of the translators stiffened. "It's calling you a god," she said quietly. "No, not a god, a survivor of the end," Kyle froze. He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that he wasn't divine or immortal, that he'd just refused to die when the universe demanded it. But when he looked at their faces, hollow, trembling, he couldn't speak. Humanity had become a myth, even to its enemies. The Deathworlders weren't just feared now. They were worshipped by the broken. As the days passed, Kale's team helped the Vire rebuild small shelters, shared food, and treated radiation burns. The old hatred lingered under the surface, but necessity softened it. One night, as they sat around a dim campfire fueled by scavenged debris, one of the Vire engineers asked why humans kept fighting even when there was no chance left. Kale didn't have a rehearsed answer. He stared into the flickering flames and said, "Because it's what we do. We don't know how to stop. You could burn our worlds, take our air, crush our bones, and we'd still crawl toward you with teeth and nails. We don't fight because we want to win. We fight because we refuse to lose." The Vyre fell silent. And then, one by one, they bowed their heads. Kale felt something shift that night. Not forgiveness, but understanding. The kind that only comes after everything else has been destroyed. Months turned into a year. The reclamation project grew. Human engineers worked alongside Vyre scientists to rebuild power grids, purify water, and decontaminate the soil. But the scars of the war were too deep to fully erase. Every storm that rolled across the horizon carried the taste of ash. Every sunrise was filtered through the haze of old weapons fire. Kale stayed longer than he was supposed to, unable to leave. The Vyre children followed him when he patrolled the outskirts. They called him Kale the Undying. He laughed bitterly every time he heard it, but he didn't correct them. Then one morning, a new ship appeared in the sky, sleek, angular, carrying a symbol neither human nor Vyre recognized. When it landed, its emissary stepped out, tall, silver-skinned, eyes like mirrors. The newcomer introduced itself as Theron of the Illith Dominion. Its tone was polite, curious. It said they had been watching the war from afar, that they had not intervened because they did not think humanity would survive. "But you did," Theron said. "You endured what none could. You are anomalous." Kale didn't like the word. It sounded like something a scientist said before a vivisection. The Illith wanted to learn, to understand what makes humans capable of such persistence. He refused. But the diplomats on both sides were hungry for alliances, and curiosity was the new currency. Within weeks, a research accord was signed. Human and Vyre representatives would travel to the Illith capital to discuss cooperation. Kale was chosen as one of the escorts. The journey was long and quiet. Kale spent most of it staring out the viewport, watching the stars crawl by. He wondered if this was what peace looked like. A cold silence between species that had nearly exterminated each other. When they arrived, the Illith world was breathtaking. Crystalline cities suspended in the clouds, rivers of light flowing between towers. But beneath the beauty was something clinical, sterile. The Illith treated them like specimens, curious, dangerous, fragile. During one demonstration, Theron invited Kyle to participate in a test of resilience. The Illith soldiers wore sealed suits and neural stabilizers. Kale wore standard armor, patched and dented. They flooded the chamber with pressure, heat, and gravity fluctuations. The Illith struggled. Kyle stayed standing. Blood trickled from his nose, his skin burned, but he endured. When they increased the load, he collapsed, and then impossibly stood again. The chamber fell silent. The readings went off scale. Theron's mirrored eyes reflected Kale's grim smile as he whispered through the pain, "Now you understand what Deathworlder means." From that day, the Illith stopped seeing humans as curiosities. They began calling them the Endurers. The word spread across systems, a new legend in the making. Humanity had once been mocked for its weakness, for its soft skin, fragile bones, and short lives. Now those same traits became symbols of terrifying strength. They were creatures that felt everything, pain, fear, loss, and still moved forward. They didn't overcome the impossible by being unbreakable. They did it by breaking and rebuilding themselves over and over again. Years later, Kale stood once more beneath a foreign sky, watching new colonies rise from the ashes. Peace, fragile as glass, stretched between species that once sought each other's extinction. He had seen too much death to believe it would last forever, but for now it was enough. As the sun broke through the clouds, he touched the scar on his cheek and smiled faintly. Somewhere out there, new soldiers were being trained. New wars were waiting to be born. And when they came, the galaxy would remember. Humanity was not just a species. It was a force of nature that refused to die. Kyle turned to his team, eyes cold and steady. "Let them come," he said quietly. "The universe still doesn't understand. We were never made to conquer. We were made to survive." And in that moment, under a sky reborn from war, the Deathworlder walked on. Not a monster, not a god, but a man who had taught the stars what it truly meant to endure.